So now let's talk about something that I think is really important as we're getting more patients participating using medical cannabis. You know, oftentimes they are prescribed other drugs. And so cannabis and prescription drug interactions that you need to watch for is a very important topic. With Dr. Darina Douchi. She is a 17-year clinical pharmacist. She also served honorably in the Army from 2009 to 2017, and she's the CEO of Curativo Hemp. So I am going to go ahead and unmute Miss Douchi and spotlight your video so that you can take it over.
Hello,
all right, doctor.
Yes, can you hear me?
You sound great.
Fantastic. So thanks for the intro and thanks for everything you guys have been doing. It's truly an honor working with all of you and being part of this great cause. I was never taught about this stuff in school, in pharmacy school, which is embarrassing to say sometimes because it's cost me a lot of money, right? But I'm glad to be part of it, so I can share the knowledge and information that I've been learning in the last many years of my clinical practice. And my clinical practice is to involve psychiatric and pain management. I want to go ahead and share some slides with you to kind of give, because I have a boring topic. I'm sorry. It's not the most favorite topic for a lot of people to listen to. I hope you can follow with me. I will try to make it as enjoyable as possible. How about that? Can you see my slides? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. So in my personal humble opinion, I believe that cannabis is by far the most misunderstood and discriminated against plant. It's certainly not a new plant. It's prehistoric plant dating back to 12,000 BC. According to the United States Code, they consider the cannabis plant, which basically comprises of everything, all parts of the plant, but it's the Cannabis sativa L plant. For the sake of legalization in Texas, they refer to hemp or industrial hemp, and the only difference is it's still the cannabis plant. It has the concentration of the tetrahydrocannabinoid, which is the THC, the stuff that makes you high, like Anita was mentioning earlier. It has to be less than 0.3% by concentration, basically. And then looking back at when this is started, the first medicinal use was actually reported back in 37 BC by the mystical emperor Chen Ning of China. He actually prescribed medicinal marijuana tea for the purposes of gout, for treating gout, rheumatism, malaria, and oddly enough, poor memory. And it went around the world for so many years, and people have used it in different parts of the world. The fuss didn't really start until it made it to the US or North America in the late 1900s. That's when actually the issue with this unknowingly addiction to morphine started to emerge, and 2 to 5% of the population was getting addicted to it. And that's when the FDA started creating these new programs and the Substance Control Act and all these good stuff that we're trying to fight right now. Looking at the cannabis plant, it actually has more than 500 identified chemicals. Of those, currently, there are at least 120 chemicals that are being investigated and researched by pharmaceutical companies. We hear a lot about the 6 main cannabinoids, and those are like the THC, CBD, CBN. You see the list up there. But there are, like Anita was mentioning, you know, your endocannabinoid system involves not just the receptors, but there's also the proteins and neurotransmitters, and it's just a whole network of systems. And that's what makes cannabis such a unique and fascinating plant, because, and people ask me all the time, it's like, how come it treats anxiety? And at the same time, you're telling me it treats pain. And then you're telling me it also treats my IBS. Well, because your endocannabinoid system is actually everywhere in your body, and it's so massive and interconnected that while you're actually regulating one neurotransmitter, you're also, you know, generating or also empowering that endocannabinoid system to work functionally better. Because research have found that people with behavioral health problems, with migraines, with IBS, actually have an underactive endocannabinoid system. So you have to activate it, like Anita was saying, with small doses of cannabis, going low and starting slow, and then just increase your dose a little bit at a time to activate it. And the reason we say slow, because I'm going to cover here shortly how when you go really high with your cannabis, you can actually do the reverse effect to your liver and your enzymes. This is just how cannabinoid distribution activity mechanism is and how it involves the gene encoding receptors, the transporters, and so on. Cannabis metabolism is a really fascinating and very vast field in the field of medicine and pharmacy. It's a complex, and the complexity of the cannabinoid pathway is really intriguing because it depends a lot. Our metabolism, in a nutshell, depends on your pharmacogenetics. Pharmacogenetics is basically how your genes affect your response to drugs. Okay, and then ultimately we have what's called the pharmacokinetics, and pharmacokinetics is the study of what your body does to a substance. So from the time you absorb it, so we have four parts of the absorption, to the pharmacokinetics. We absorb it, we distribute it, we metabolize it, and then we excrete it, right? So we refer to those as ADME. So anytime you play around with that process, you're going to get a different effect. It's not always going to be the same. So this is where it's important when people are like, well, it's going to be in an oil. It's going to be the same if you just put it in water. No, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to give you the same effect, because when you put something in water, your body is going to react and process it completely differently, and it's going to give you a completely different reaction. I actually I'm using Sativex in some of my references because it's probably the only one that had documented in steady clinical trials that we can say, those were pretty steady, and it's a combination of THC and CBD. When they did this at clinical doses, so this is normal human doses, there was no drug-drug interactions. The drug-drug interactions were found when you start pumping up the dose to really high doses. Also, women tend to metabolize drugs faster than men. They have higher metabolism, so they metabolize at 20 to 30% of the time. That's why when women drink alcohol, they get drunk faster, not just because their body is smaller, but also their liver actually works faster. So again, the metabolism of cannabis is actually dose dependent or concentration dependent. So the more you give it, different reactions will take place, and also your enzyme activities. So enzymes, we're going to focus now on your liver enzymes. We know CBD, for example, works on at least 36 different enzymes, whereas THC works on less enzymes. But some enzymes, for example, THC is predominantly metabolized by 314 and 2C9, and vice versa for CBD also works on 3A4 and 2C19. So what they have found that when they give clinical doses, these enzymes are actually induced, so they work really good. They're very active, right? So if you're taking another medication that works on those same enzymes, your doctor will need to adjust your dose. Your body will get rid of that drug really fast because you have a very efficient enzyme now. So we have to up your other dose. Now, what we recognize that they also found that when patients take very high doses of cannabis, these same enzymes were actually inhibited. They stopped working. And we called it, but they also realized that after a while, when the drug or the cannabis started getting out of your system, those enzymes started working back again. So they call this reversible inhibition. So initially it gets inhibited if it's at a high dose, but then they go back to normal. So this is where it's important to start with that small dose and stay at that low level unless you need to go up on the dose. Another thing, like not all inhibition of enzymes are bad. For example, CBD inhibits cyclooxygenase 2 enzyme, or it's referred to as COX-2 enzyme. This is the one responsible for the pain and inflammatory responses in your body. So inhibiting that enzyme is actually a good thing. It helps you with your pain and your migraine management, your aches, your any ailment. Really, most ailments actually cause inflammations. And when we were talking about, inhibiting those enzymes, for example, it becomes very important when you're inhibiting an enzyme like 3A4 or TC19s. We're talking about serious medications that are gonna that need adjusting, like the amitriptylines or epilepsy medications or your opiates, right? Because now, if they're inhibited, you're gonna have an increased dose in your body. Also, part of your genetics, for example, they have found that people of a European descent, they lack certain enzymes. And this has actually been, people have approached me, well, I take, the cannabis, I don't feel anything, and I keep pumping up the dose and nothing happens. What's happening? Well, you might actually have a deficiency. Just like some people don't break down alcohol because they don't have alcohol dehydrogenase. Some people don't have some of these main enzymes that break down cannabis. So it's important to know your body composition, and you can get a liver test, and your doctor can order that. Or they also make kits that you can purchase online. I don't have a preference over any of them. Honestly, I don't know which one is better than others. I haven't tried them. I just know they're available. So that would be a good way to test and see, am I deficient on 2C19 or 3A4? Now, some people from European descent, for example, about 15% of people, they have a protein coating on their enzyme that makes their 2C9 enzyme less active. In that sense, they're not breaking down their THC. So they're taking it and they're not getting much response. So those are things to keep in mind. Different route of administrations are give you different results. For example, when you smoke, this is the most common method. You smoke it, goes in fast, goes out fast. But the neat thing about this, the way to control it, different people get different responses. It's all about the technique, how you smoke it, the frequency, how long you hold it in. Cannabis is actually a lipophilic substance, which means it will store in your fatty tissue. So just because you don't feel that high effect doesn't mean it's not working. It's actually still working later on. It tends to kick in. People start to feel it within 3 to 10 minutes. It peaks about 15 to 30 minutes, and it could stay in your body for up to 27 hours, given that therapeutic effect. And again, it all depends on the dose and the frequency of how often you do that. Also with oral, well, with the inhaled part, the nice thing about it, let's say you have liver problems or those deficiencies in those enzymes, you can actually use the smoking route to avoid going through the liver, and you still get benefits from the cannabis plant. The oral route, for example, it's the slow in and slow out route. Now, with this, it's the most commonly misused route, and it ends a lot of patients in emergency rooms because they probably have tried the smoking route before, and they take a dose in, they don't feel anything, they pop another one and a third one and a fourth one, and then by then they reach that psychosis level where the dose is very high and their heart rate is going up, and then they freak out and they go to the emergency room. Really, all they're going to do to you when you go to the emergency room, they're just going to sit you down and let the dose basically get out of your system. It tends to take 2 to 3 hours to kick in, sometimes up to 6 hours. It peaks actually at 6 hours. So it stays in your system a lot longer, and they contribute that to the liver metabolism. And because when it goes through your liver, it actually creates a substance called 11-hydroxy-THC. And that one is, they believe, is what allows the drug to stay in your system for so long. They're still looking into what other therapeutic effects it might have in your system. Food does affect your absorption. So if you take fatty food, for example, take it with something that contains fat, you will have better bioavailability and absorption in your system now. And it's going to give you a more consistent concentration in your body, versus if you take it on fast, on an empty stomach, you're going to feel it faster, but not necessarily the concentration is going to stay there at the same time. Now, the oral mucosal route, some people call it sublingual, some buccal route. The buccal and the oral mucosal is the one here in your cheeks. The sublingual is the one under your tongue. This one also bypasses your liver. Actually, partially, part of it does go into your liver, but the majority of it does bypasses your liver. So in case you have problems with, liver enzyme problems, it takes about 15 minutes to start to feel it, and it peaks at about 45 minutes to 2 hours, and it stays in your body up to 36 hours. The key here, again, is how constantly you take it, and it's important to, especially if you have chronic problems, we always recommend that you take a small daily dose to keep that accumulation. So drug-drug interaction is not just one simple science. It really depends on what other disease states do you have, what other drug and foods that you take. Sometimes grapefruit juice, for example, when you take it in small amount, it's okay. But you see on a lot of bottles, it says medication bottles, avoid grapefruit juice. Well, you really need about 32 ounces to affect your liver. But things like that, or other food, you know, like cheeses and stuff, could also affect your enzymatic activity. Now, also the plant itself, the cannabis plant, is a very adaptable plant. So it absorbs a lot of heavy metals and toxins and pesticides. So those also can play a role in how your body reacts to it, especially if you're taking other medications, like if you're taking medications that binds to your protein, to your blood proteins, we will see drug interactions with that, especially with like HIV or oncology medications. Here's a good table, simple but busy table. On the left-hand side, I have listed the main enzymes that I can think of. And then when a patient takes a very high dose, we will see that reverse inhibition I was talking about. Well, in that case, we're going to need to reduce the dose of your other medications because we're completely stopping the enzyme. And let's say you're taking a fentanyl, right? So that fentanyl is actually going to start accumulating in your body, and it's going to cause a major adverse effect because it's not going anywhere. Versus somebody who's taken a clinical dose. Well, now at a clinical dose, your enzymes are actually very efficient and they're working a little better than they need to. They're actually, we call an induction, they're induced, they're energetic. And that's when sometimes we have to actually increase your dose of like phenytoin and your barbiturates or prednisones. Who should avoid cannabis? Definitely test your enzymes. If you are deficient on those certain enzymes, you can either avoid them or use a different route. There are like I said, the sublingual route, the inhalation, or the rectal route, sometimes the topical route as well. Now, patients that have cardiovascular diseases, because THC works on the enzyme 2J2, which happens to be located on the heart, that actually causes an increase in your heart rate. CBD doesn't do that. So if you're interested in taking cannabis, take one without THC, all right? And then just also inform your doctor so they can monitor your heart functions. Also, patients that have schizophrenia or psychotic disorders are recommended to start very low and also inform their psychiatrist so they can monitor their activities. Limitations, I hear this a lot where hepatotoxicity is a problem. I have looked into different studies. The last one I looked at was University of Arkansas, where they administered extremely high doses of CBD to mice. A normal human dose is 20 milligrams per kilogram. In this case, they gave the poor mice 2,460 milligrams per kilogram. That equates for somebody who weighs 170 pounds, a normal average person. You know, when you go to the store, the bottles of CBD, those are 500 milligrams. That means each dose is 380 bottles. I don't know a normal human being that takes 380 bottles, but that's their study. Of course, it's going to burn your liver and it's going to give you hepatotoxicity. The only hepatotoxicity I can assure you was actually related to the synthetic cannabis and that cannabinoids, and that's spice, which is banned. Those are the only ones that are related to hepatotoxicity. So always use the lowest dose. Microdosing is recommended. Only up your dose every 2 to 3 days. Alert your provider and pharmacist. Monitor your enzymes, medications, and conduct a gene test if you needed to. So that was my portion. I hope I didn't put you all to sleep, and thank you so much.
I definitely did not go to sleep. I love that. I felt like I did not know all of the words that you were saying, but I feel much smarter now. So.
I tried to simplify them, but that's pharmacokinetics for you. It's just, there's no way to simplify it.
Yeah, no, and actually a couple of people in the feed were saying that you gave them some really helpful information about prescriptions that they're taking and things that they need to now take into account. I mean, really, this is education. It's so important so that people can safely, it's already a very safe and efficacious plant, but just really having it be the most safe and optimal experience for people.
Fantastic. Well, I'm on Facebook and also Instagram, or you can reach me through Texas NORML. Thank you all.
Awesome. Well, I tagged you into the comments so people can reach out to you. And I really appreciate you joining us today.